as collaborative, the private sector. It could come from the intelligence community, right? Typically what happens is we have indications that we may have been breached and we just don't know it. So what happens is 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock on a Friday, Shane, myself, or our other colleagues get tasking to call you and give you the information we have. Sometimes it's just a couple IP addresses, sometimes it is a little bit more substantial information. But oftentimes what's happening is I'm cold calling you. We don't have a relationship, so I'm using Dun & Bradstreet, LinkedIn, any resource I can find to find a point of contact. What ends up happening is I call your 800 number, and I'm speaking to your guardian at the gate, and I say, hi, my name is Brian Yoshino. I'm with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, part of the Department of Homeland Security. By that point, you've already hung up on me, right? So I'm gonna call back, and I'm gonna spend the next 60 seconds socially engineering your phone attendant into believing I am not a social engineer. Right? I will do everything I can to de-escalate and say, look, I know this sounds like a scam call. Please give me 30 seconds. What I'm gonna do is I'm only gonna provide you information. I'm not gonna ask you any questions. I'm gonna give you the information I have. I'm gonna ask you to do 2 things. 1, provide that to your IT or cybersecurity operations group. And 2, on a separate parallel path, verify my identity. I'm gonna provide you information on how to do that. Again, this is why it is so critically important. My current record for the worst timeline, from the time I got tasking and made the very first phone call to when the stakeholder believed I said who I was 10 days. That's 10 days that the threat actor is doing threat actory things. So again, this is why it is so critically important for you to have that established relationship with CISA, with FBI, with Secret Service, because each one of us keeps a Rolodex, right? So if I get tested and say, call Acme Corp, I have your phone number. I can reach you off ours. I'm not saying I want your CISO's personal phone number, but if you have a SOC, if you have a watch floor, if you have a security operations center, give me that phone number. And I say phone number because I don't want to do this over email. If the threat actor is monitoring ingoing and outgoing comms, I don't want to do anything to tip them off. So again, establish that procedure, establish that relationship ahead of time.
Sure thing. I'm Joe Kiefer from the Chicago office here in the Secret Service. I supervise our cyber fraud task force, which two parts of our task force. One, I have a team of agents who investigate fraud, cyber fraud, whether it's network intrusion or business email compromise or ransomware. That's one section of the cyber fraud task force, and the other section is a group of private and public sector partners who gather together quarterly, and we share information and work together to sort of close that gap. A lot of it what Brian is talking about, in that if we establish relationships between each other, if there is some information that needs to be shared, or if somebody needs some assistance, we can reach out and have that problem solved a little bit sooner. So liaison and networking and information sharing is the other part of what I do. And I've been supervising this squad for about the last year.
Thank you.
That's it in a nutshell.
And Matthew Onsigard?
Yeah, thank you all for having me. Can you hear me okay? Matt Onsigard, I'm a supervisory special agent for the FBI in Chicago, where my job is to supervise our criminal cyber squad and task force. And so, similar to Joe, I've got a group of FBI agents and state and federal law enforcement officers that sit with us. And our job is to go after cyber criminals and those that are motivated usually by money. We've also got another cyber apparatus that I'll just mention in our office that's focused on national security cyber threats. So if you think about any of our nation state adversaries that have an intelligence service, most of those intelligence services these days also have an offensive cyber capability. At the FBI, we sort of break our work into 2 buckets. Criminal work, which we're all sort of focused on similar things: ransomware, business email compromise, data theft, and extortion. We've also got a national security mission where we know about these particular offensive cyber groups that are targeting whatever it is that they're targeting in the United States. And so we've got some specific focuses here in Chicago on that aspect as well. I have been an agent for about 19 years and supervising this group for the last 2+.
I just want to mention one more thing about why it is so important to have these relationships. So yesterday, the Secret Service held an event, one of their cybercrime task force meetings. That was one of the most fun events I've ever been to. So basically, this was a tabletop exercise revolving around AI, ML, social engineering. And again, the people it was an invite-only event. And the way you get invited to those events is establishing that contact. I mean, how many of you have been to tabletop exercises before, right? And oftentimes, you have it inject and you talk about it for a couple minutes and then the conversation goes to someone else, hey, we're going for lunch. That tabletop, the people were so engaged that it was hard for the moderator to bring people back out of the conversation. So again, establish those contacts and get access to those information in those events from our federal partners.